Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Anna, and as you can tell by the title of this video, it's going to be really fun just ranking all of the Cosmere books that I've read so far. I think I've read all of the Cosmere books that are out now. I've never done a ranking of all of the Cosmere books, and I just thought it would be so much fun if we did so, especially because there is some sort of a pattern here that I might discuss at the end of this video. But for now, let us do a ranking of all of the Cosmere novels that I have read so far. And at 18th place, this is the last book, or the least one that I have enjoyed for the Cosmere, that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. And honestly, this is not a bad book by any means. It really isn't. It's just not for me. It's just one of those cases where the story really isn't for me. The vibe isn't for me. It just has all of the elements that I usually don't enjoy in a story. This is very much a cozy stories, and that is the reason why I don't enjoy this book at all. You know, I'm not really into the vibe of The Princess Bride. It is cute, don't get me wrong, like the story is very cute, but it's just not my vibe. It's not something that I would gravitate towards. It's not something that I would pick out myself. The only reason why I read this book, it's because it is a part of the Cosmere universe. That is literally the only reason. But in this book, we follow this young girl named Tress, and she has lived in the same island for all of her life. She doesn't really have any interest in, you know, just exploring, going out, because she is a very practical person. She just likes living her day-to-day basis and just collecting her teacups. But one day, her lover, Charlie, which is the sun's Duke, he is kidnapped by an evil witch, and nobody is going to save him because the Duke doesn't even really like Charlie, and he just sees it as an opportunity to get rid of him. So Tress has to embark on an adventure to go and save Charlie. She has to cross oceans, and these oceans are not the ones that we are used to because they're not made of water. They are actually made of spores, and if these spores are in contact with any type of water, they can have many effects. I think you have 5 different spores. So I think the green ones, which is the Emerald Sea, they actually form vines and they puncture the ship, causing it to sink. You have spores that actually explode. You have spores that form crystals. You know, just crazy shenanigans. So this is a very dangerous sea, but nonetheless, Tress is not going to give up. She's going to find her love, and as you can tell, it is quite similar to The Princess Bride. And I'm not really into pirate books as well. You know, the ocean is not really my favorite setting, so I was also not really enjoying that part. So overall, this book was just not for me. Some people love this book, adore this book. It is cute, just not my personal taste. And then at 17, we have The Alloy of Law. Now, a lot of people actually don't really enjoy this book, and I wasn't any different. This book, it does introduce us to Era 2 of Mistborn, and honestly, I don't even remember what happens in this book. If you ask me for the plot, I don't know. I cannot tell you. I genuinely do not know what this book is about, but in this book, we are introduced to Wax and Wayne, and I do enjoy their dynamic. The problem is, you know, Wax is kind of saltless. You know, he is the type of person that he's very serious. He doesn't really have much of a personality, but Wayne really compensates for that, because Wayne, he is eccentric, he is dramatic, he is freaking funny, and I absolutely love the dynamic that he has with Wax, because that is the only way that Wax is going to have a personality. It's when he's with Wayne. So this is where we get introduced to both of these characters that are going to be the central characters in Mistborn Era 2. But again, I don't remember the plot, like, at all. I think it has something to do with a train. I don't know if somebody made the train hostage. I really don't remember. I do remember, though, that this book, it does obviously connect with all of the others, although this is some sort of like prequel to the trilogy of Mistborn Era 2. But honestly, I don't really remember much more, so I can't say much more. It was just forgettable. And then at 16th place, we have Isles of the Emberlark. This one was the most recent one, I think, out in the Cosmere universe. And the reason why I don't really enjoy this one, and this is going to have to do with the later part of the video that I do want to talk about, is the fact that it's a very much sci-fi, and I'm not into sci-fi at all. But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just the setting, because half of this book I really enjoyed. You know, I really enjoy our character Dusk here, because he is a trapper. And in his planet, in his home world, trappers are essentially, I don't want to say hunters, but essentially that's kind of what they are, you know, because they walk around the forest, and these forests in his planet are extremely dangerous. There are always dangers lurking around, and you really do have to become a professional trapper in order to walk those woods, you know, and he is the last of his kind, because trapping, you know, it's sort of a tradition by now, and it's not really used anymore. Not a lot of people are trappers, because you just move on, you know, technology shows up, and you just move on from that life. So Dusk really is one of the last trappers. He's one of the last people that actually know how to walk around the forest of his planet without being killed. So he's kind of representing the past, and I really enjoyed him in this book because, you know, he's a 40-year-old man. He doesn't really understand all the technology because his planet, it hasn't been invaded, but there are alien species that are interested in his planet and in his planet's resources. For example, the magic system here, it's all about the birds. The birds, all of them have different abilities. So most of the birds, they can actually sense when danger is around, but one of Dusk's birds, they actually have another set of powers, you know, another ability. They allow Dusk to see his dead body. And what I mean by this is, for example, he's walking inside of the forest, and if he has a vision of his dead body, he understands, okay, where my body lays, there is some sort of danger there that I have to be aware of. Otherwise, I'm going to end up like my vision, you know? And these foreigners, they want these birds. They want to study them. They want to understand what the type of magic it is, if they can use it in their own worlds, etc. And because of this, obviously his planet is changing. There's so much more technology because obviously these foreign people, they bring their own technology and show them, and they want that technology. They want to advance. So Dusk is kind of like a shadow of the past, and he has a lot of struggle, you know, accompanying everything and all of the changes. He feels like he's not useful anymore. He feels like he is, you know, just some relic of the past to be looked at and pointed at. Oh my god, like, look, he's a trapper. We haven't had these in such a long time. Oh my god, he's an actual trapper, you know? It's kind of like he's a tourist attraction, and he just cannot compute with everything that is going on around him. So I really enjoyed that point of view and the talk about progress and how we have to accept it and move forward or fall behind. But then on the other side, we do follow a different type of character, and although she is an interesting species inside the Cosmere, and there is the elements of found family, there was just something that didn't click for me. I don't know what it was. I just wasn't interested in her storyline, and that's why for half of the book I was also a little bit bored. So it's not a bad book by any means, but it's just, you know, her storyline didn't really interest me as much as Dusk's storyline. And then we have Warbreaker, and this one might actually be a shock because a lot of people do enjoy Warbreaker. I didn't really enjoy it that much, and the reason why is because literally nothing happens in this book, like, at all. Nothing really happens in this book, and I thought it was going to be so much more political than it actually was, and I think that was my main issue. I was expecting so much more politics because this is spent, you know, inside of a court, and you do have two POVs from the court, so I actually thought, okay, there's going to be a lot of politics, but no. Literally nothing. I was so disappointed. I was like so disappointed. Like, nothing really happens because in this book we follow 3 sets of characters. So our main character series, she is set to marry the big bad evil emperor of this world. You know, people talk about him like he is very fearful. He's someone that you should be afraid of. He is this big bad man. Everyone is intimidated by him. They don't even talk back to him. They don't even talk to him if he hasn't talked to them first. So you can understand that this emperor, you know, he is seen as a big bad villain guy. And Siri, she's set to marry off to him. At first, it was her older sister, Vivenna. She was the one that was set to marry him, but her father didn't really want her to go because she is very important to the independence of their own kingdom. So he sends Siri instead, the youngest of them all. So she goes, and of course, she is very afraid. She doesn't really understand, you know, this emperor guy, you can't even look at him, otherwise he's going to murder you. So she is definitely scared, and she was not trained at all to be a part of the court. And then you have Vivenna, who's trying to save her sister from this bad guy, you know, from the emperor himself. And then you have Lightsong, that he is actually considered sort of like a deity, you know, a god by these people, and he just roams around the court and he has visions, and those visions are interpreted, you know, by the religious people, by the like of priests, let's just say. So that's literally his job. It's just to have dreams and visions and try to understand, you know, what the heck is going on, what is the future of this empire and all that kind of stuff. And of course, Siri does find out that the big bad emperor is actually not that bad. He is very, very cute, and you do have a cute romance here. But like I said, because Siri and Lightsong are at the court, I thought there was going to be a lot more intrigue, especially because you'd start to unravel a lot of things throughout the plot that indicate that there could be so much more politicking here, but no. Literally nothing, you know. Siri barely does anything, Lightsong barely does anything, and Vivenna, she's the worst of all because she's out here trying to save her sister, but she can't do it by herself, which is fine, you know, fair enough. But she meets 2 guys, they are so sketchy, and she doesn't really understand that they're sketchy, and then she goes on a whole, like, you know, adventure of her own. But the problem is, she doesn't do anything. Like, she's literally not useful at all. Like, she doesn't do anything, and that was my main issue with this book, is that there's just nothing happening here whatsoever. And next we have the Sunlight Man, and this one, the only reason why it is so low, it's because I really didn't enjoy the plot whatsoever. You know, in this world, we follow one of the characters from the Stormlight Archive, which I am not going to say what it is, otherwise it's going to be a huge spoiler. And because of that, of course, you should read the Stormlight Archive first, in my opinion, and then you can read the Sunlight Man. So we follow one of the characters from the Stormlight Archive, and he is running away constantly, you know, from planet to planet, and he ends up in this planet where the sun can literally kill you, okay? This sun, it is so strong, it is so hot that it melts everything at the surface of the planet. So these people are, you know, in multiple spaceships, and they are always escaping from the sun. And whenever, you know, they are on the opposite side of the planet where it's dark, all of the spaceships kind of like form, and they form a city, and that is really cool. I'm going to admit, you know, that is very cool, and I did enjoy the world because, you know, I don't know, it never occurred to me that the sun could actually kill you, you know? It's a very cool idea. But the problem is, the plot is just that. You know, this character, of course, he is trying to find a way to escape this planet, and he is trying to run away from the people who are after him, but he's also trying to find a way to help these people, because these people are being ruled by a tyrant. You know, they're constantly running away, they don't have much food, they don't have anything, basically. You know, it's very hard to survive in this world, and I don't even know how they continuously do it, but it is quite hard, and that's why he is trying to help them. But essentially, the plot is just him helping these people, and they're just constantly running away from the sun, and that is the entirety of the plot. Like, literally, this is what the plot is, you know, that's what the story is. Of course, you do have some other elements, but I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, you know, I thought it was going to be much more interesting, and in fact, I actually thought that the Sunlight Man was going to be my favorite secret project, but alas, it actually was not. But yeah, that's why this one is so low on the list. And then we have Elantris. Now, this one was, you know, the first book published by Brandon Sanderson, so I wasn't expecting something amazing or show-stopping, you know, groundbreaking, but I actually do think I enjoyed this one much more than a lot of people do. I don't think this was a bad book by any means, and honestly, it does bring me back in the sense of, this does have the old Brandon Sanderson's writing. I don't know if I want to say it's old style Brandon Sanderson, but it definitely feels like one of his older works. And of course, it is not perfect because it is his first work published, but I actually enjoyed this one a lot more than Warbreaker, for example, because this one, at least it did have some politics, you know, it did have some politicking going on in the plot. So in this book, we do follow 3 sets of characters. We follow this young boy, and he is the prince of the kingdom in this world, and he wakes up one day and he realizes that he has the plague. I'm saying the plague because it is some sort of disease that some people get, and they don't have a cure for it. They don't understand what it is, and obviously everyone is afraid of that disease. So what they usually do is they pick up these people and put them in the ancient city of Elantris. Everything is decrepit there. You know, everything is decrepit, it's moldy, it's gooey, everything is just filled with mud, and all of the sick people are inside of that city. So even though he is the prince, he is sent, you know, to the city. He is sent there, he is abandoned, and the king actually tells everybody that his son has died. You know, he doesn't want to tell anyone that he caught the disease. So he has to figure out a way to survive in the city of Elantris, because they do get food, but it's not a lot of food. So of course you're going to have gangs inside of there. You're going to have a lot of fights for food and survival, just all of that stuff. But he is also going to try and figure out what happened to Elantris, because this city was once great, it was beautiful, and it was said to actually be habited by godlike creatures, because they could actually use magic. And in this world, the magic, it's kind of like runes where you have to draw them very perfectly, otherwise it's not going to do what you intend. It can actually do something completely different, which is dangerous. And he's going to find a lot of the books there, and he's going to try and learn that ancient magic in order to bring Elantris back to what it used to be and heal all of these people, and thus himself as well. And we follow a priest from a different kingdom, and he is trying to turn people into his religion, convert them. There we go. Sometimes I do forget the words, I'm sorry. He is trying to convert everybody into his own religion, and he doesn't like the Elantris people at all. He keeps saying that those people have been, you know, disgraced by God. That's why they are sick, because they don't believe in the right God. And he's just doing a lot of political machinations behind the scenes, you know. And we also follow this young girl, and she was set to actually marry the prince that was sent to Elantris. And she gets there, she doesn't marry him because she's actually told that he is dead. So she gets very, very sad, because it's kind of recurrent for her. You know, this is the second time that she was sent to be married, and the second time that she doesn't get married, because the person that she was promised to dies. And she isn't a typical woman, you know, she doesn't really know how to fight, but she has a lot of opinions. She's very strong-willed, and she is the one that's actually going to find out what the heck is going on in the city, what happened to the prince, and what is that priest doing here. So yeah, I did really enjoy this book. It's not obviously his best work by any means, but I also don't think it is one of his worst, despite being the first book that he ever published. I do think people sometimes do go a little bit too hard on Elantris, and I think that happens because they read a lot of his works first and then they go to Elantris, and they do get a little bit disappointed because obviously, you know, since it is his first work, it's not going to be as good as all of the books that he has published ever since. But honestly, I didn't really think it was that bad. And then we have Shadows of Self, and this one is, you know, the second book in the Mistborn Era 2 trilogy, or the first book in the trilogy, I don't really know. This one comes after Alloy of Law, and honestly, I don't remember too much from the plot as well, but in this book, we are introduced to one character that I absolutely love, and it is Steris. I love her. I love her as a character. I just find her so interesting, so compelling. It is actually quite hard to find characters like Steris because she is the type of woman that she's always ready for any situation. She always has backup plans upon backup plans. She always brings, you know, if she has to bring a scissor, she brings 3 scissors just in case. She's the type of woman that is ready for any set of emergency. You know, she loves planning to the extreme, and that is something so funny and rare to see in fantasy characters. I don't know, it's just such a funny quirk that she has, and I would love to be like Steris. You know, I would love to be like her because I do plan things, but I never really plan ahead. But Steris, she's always ready for any type of situation. But I do remember enjoying this book. You know, is it his best work? No, not really, but I do remember enjoying this, enjoying the characters, enjoying where the story was going. But it's not, you know, as good as Era 1, and I do think it is because of the setting. You know, the setting to me, it's just not going to compete with the setting of Mistborn Era 1. I don't really enjoy when fantasy books are set in times where you do have a little bit more technology. You know, this is obviously not the 21st century, but we do have the beginning of cars here, we have the beginning of electricity, guns, and it's not something that I do really enjoy, you know, but that is just personal taste. Other than that, I don't really know what to say because I genuinely do not remember anything from this book. And then we have Rhythm of War. Now, this one is my least favorite Stormlight Archive book, and it's because of many, many reasons that a lot of people also have as well. This one, I just really wasn't interested in Navani as many other people were. She's not a bad character by any means, and it was interesting to see a lot from her point of view, you know, her own past, her own struggles, traumas, just all of that. It was interesting to see, but the problem was, I think Brandon Sanderson, you know, over-explained the magic system to me. I don't need science classes, and that's what I felt like I was reading. You know, I just felt like I was reading a lecture from a science class because he went in so detailed about the stormlight, how it can be used, all the different types of lights, and I do understand why he did that because obviously Navani, she is a scholar, or she's not really a scholar, but she would love to be a scholar, and she is good at it. So I do understand why he had to explain so many of the concepts of the stormlight, but it just really took the magic away from fantasy. You know, I do enjoy a horror magic system. I do enjoy when I understand the magic and I can predict what is going to happen, but I don't really like when authors explain too much of it where it does feel like science, because in my opinion, then what's the magic in it? You know, where is the magic? Because it feels like we're talking about something like physics or chemistry, biology, you know, just something very scientific and not magical at all, you know, whimsical. And that's kind of what I felt, you know, and in this book, that really was the one thing that bothered me the most. It was just all of the talk about the magic system, everything just being so detailed that it was hard to get through. It really, really was. I also didn't really enjoy how some of these characters went back in their own personal journeys and own mental health, especially Kaladin. You know, I didn't really enjoy what he did with Kaladin in this book. I think he took things way too far because, I don't know, I just felt like Kaladin was slowly healing from book to book, and this one, he kind of went, you know, 10 steps backwards, and I do understand that that is something that happens when it comes to mental health. I do understand that it is a journey and you can always walk backwards, but I don't know, it just felt like too forced. I don't know how else to explain it, but that it just felt really, really forced, especially where he goes in Wind and Truth. I just thought it was too much of an abrupt change, you know. So Rhythm of War, unfortunately, is my least favorite Stormlight Archive book. And then we have my favorite secret project, which is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. And honestly, I was not expecting to enjoy this one as much as I did. I love the romance. The characters are my favorite part. Yumi, she's such a sweet girl, but she, has grown up in a very secluded way because she is seen as this, god, as this deity, it's just this kind of like godlike entity, and a lot of the people respect her for it, of course. But the problem is she is very secluded. She has the same routine every single day. She has to do all of the little rituals, and that is a problem to her. Everything is a ritual: eating, dressing, bathing. She always has people doing all of these things for her. She has people that feed her, people that bathe her, people that dress her, just all of that sort of stuff. So she doesn't really have any freedom to do whatever she wants, and she doesn't understand or the concept of having a different life. She is frustrated with her life, but she doesn't also know anything else, which is a little bit sad. And then you have the Nightmare Painter, and he lives in a completely different world because in his world, nightmares are actually real. And the only way to fight these nightmares is by drawing. So he has to draw some sort of, drawing, whatever, to fight the nightmare. But the problem is he is very insecure about himself. He suffers from imposter syndrome. He doesn't believe that he is talented enough to actually be a great nightmare painter. He doesn't believe that he can do anything. He has zero confidence in himself. And it's just very sad to see, he truly believes that nothing that he paints, nothing that he creates is valuable. It has no value whatsoever. And he also believes that because he doesn't create anything of value, he is not valuable as, a member of society. And it's just very heartbreaking. And I could connect with the Nightmare Painter, unfortunately. And I think a lot of us who are creative people can also connect to him to some sort of level. And as you can tell, this is a completely different video because last time when I was filming, I was interrupted. I had to do a few errands and then I just could not film. And now I am back to filming. This is a completely different day, but I do remember where I was. So do not fret, do not worry. And I was talking to you guys about Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, and I was telling you that these two characters meet in very weird circumstances because they actually end up exchanging bodies. But it is weird. Hold on, my dog wants to get in. Hold on. Oh my god. Like, this always happens. There we go. Now you're staying here. They begin exchanging bodies, but the thing is, and the catch is, they cannot go back to their body. So for example, one day, the Nightmare Painter wakes up in Yumi's body. And then when Yumi goes to sleep, she wakes up in the Nightmare Painter's body. And then when he goes to sleep, he goes back to Yumi's body. So this is always constantly happening. And we get to see how these characters, they just see each other's lives and they live as other people and they see the struggles of what each of them go through. Because sometimes you might think, oh my god, like the other person has it better. The other person is doing so well. The other person has such an amazing life. But then when you actually live their life, you're like, maybe not. Like, maybe not. I don't think that person has that much of a life. Because, for example, the Nightmare Painter, he's astounded how Yumi doesn't really have freedom. Like, everything is a ritual, like I explained to you, And he's just bamboozled. He's literally perplexed. He's like, wow, like, you can't do anything without having a horde of people just going after you and doing everything for you. And then when Yumi goes back to the Nightmare Painter's body, she sees a completely different world, how everybody is free and she wants to be free, she longs for a different life. So I really, really enjoyed this book. This is my favorite of the secret projects. And then in 10th place, we have The Bands of Mourning. I think this one is the third installment in the Era 2 Mistborn, and I really did enjoy this one. I enjoyed the one huge plot twist that we have here because there are some characters, they're going to find out that they got some abilities from, essentially it was from the Lord Ruler, but then we realized that it's not really the Lord Ruler. It was someone that was posing as the Lord Ruler, so that was very interesting. I can't really talk too much about this one because spoilers. It's going to be spoilers for Era 1. It's going to be spoilers for Era 2 as well. So it is actually pretty hard to talk about these books without any spoilers, but I did enjoy this one. Although, these books are starting to feel a lot more Cosmere heavy, and I don't know if I enjoy it as much, because here we have a completely different people, and I do enjoy the custom of wearing masks. They never really take off their mask, and if they do, it's something very intimate, so I did enjoy that aspect from their culture, but, just having to wear gadgets to understand each other's language, it's just a little bit weird to me. I don't know, I just never bought that. Like, I know Sanderson is not the first person to do it, but I just never bought that kind of like, oh yeah, like, wear this gadget and you're going to understand someone else's language. I don't know why. I don't know why. It just really doesn't make sense. But other than that, I really did enjoy this one. And then in 10th place, we have Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. And unfortunately, I do join the group of people that was highly, highly disappointed with this last book. Is this a bad book by any means? No, it is not. But the reason why I was left so disappointed was because this is the finale of the Stormlight Archive, you know? It is such an epic saga, and you had to end it not in a perfect way, but in an epic way. And I feel like Sanderson really missed the mark, you know, because some of our characters, I don't know what happened to them. Especially Kaladin, you know, I did not like Kaladin's progression at all, because I was tired of the mental health discussion around him, because, you know, everything was starting to feel very repetitive, especially in Rhythm of War. But then, you know, in Rhythm of War, something very traumatic happened to him. You know, he almost ended his own life, or he contemplated that. And then in this 5th book, he's like, I'm a therapist now. Like, what? Like, I really did not understand where that came from. It was just so sudden. It was such a sudden change. And that's the thing, like, I would have done it differently. You know, in Rhythm of War, I wouldn't have had Kaladin going through everything again, you know, because it kind of felt repetitive. I think in Rhythm of War, you should have had so much more healing if you wanted to go to this route in Wind and Truth. You know, it was very abrupt. I really did not like what he did with Kaladin. Even with Svet, I think it really didn't meet up my expectations, because he is someone that was very hyped up, in my opinion, especially in The Way of Kings. You know, that open liner, Svet San Villano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. You know, like, this line, stunning. Like, stunning. It was such a great opener. And I don't know, it just, his past, I enjoyed it, but it really didn't meet up my expectations of him in the present, if you know what I'm saying. You know, I just really didn't like him as a character that much. And even with all of the other characters, I did like Dalinar's ending. I think it suited him very much. But Shallan, you know, Shallan, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have much to say about it, because Shallan, I do like her as a character, but she was never one of my favorites. But again, you know, just the whole mental health aspect was very, very used, and I'm done. You know, I'm just so tired of it. So yeah, I was very disappointed, because also the pacing in this book was horrendous. You know, doing a big battle in 10 days, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. You know, it should have been so much more drawn out, you know, like, in my opinion at least, because so many things happened in 10 days. Like, those characters, they did not sleep. Like, they couldn't have slept, because they had so many tasks and so many missions to do before the Battle of Champions. So I did think the pacing was also horrendous, and like I said, unfortunately, I really did not like this ending, and I am kind of disappointed. You know, I am going to read the second arc for the Stormlight Archive, but I am not as excited. And then we have The Lost Metal, which is the last book in the Era 2 Mistborn trilogy, and I enjoyed it. You know, I had a very, very fun time. I can't really say anything about this one, though, because this one has not only spoilers for Era 2, it also has a lot of spoilers for the Cosmere. And this one, you know, I enjoyed it. But the thing is, the more time passes, I do think, you know, am I going to enjoy the Cosmere in the future? Because, like I said, this one is very Cosmere heavy. It has the Ghost Bloods and everything, which is also connected to the Stormlight Archive. And I don't know if Brandon Sanderson did the connection very well. I don't know if he's going to do the crossovers very well, because sometimes it does feel a little bit cringe or clunky. It doesn't feel natural, you know what I'm saying? So in this book, we do have a lot of Cosmere heavy themes. We do have a lot of Easter eggs for what's going to come, and I am excited for that, and it does excite me. But on the other hand, sometimes I do think, you know, do I want all of this complication? Because I mostly read his books for fun. Like, I like the Cosmere connections. I find the Easter eggs very funny and very cool to just find them and make connections, but I am not here for that, you know? So if it becomes very Cosmere heavy, I do, you know, have some doubts in continuing even with the Cosmere. But The Lost Metal, it was solid. I did enjoy it, and it was a good ending for the Mistborn Era 2 trilogy. And then we have Oathbringer. This is the third installment in the Stormlight Archive, and I did really enjoy this one. Now, this one, it could have been a banger. Like, it literally could have been a 5-star, but the only reason why it is not is because, for once, I did not enjoy the Sanderlanche, and hear me out. I did enjoy the final battle. I think it was epic. It was everything, you know. It actually kind of felt like the ending of the Stormlight Archive, which is insane to say, but that epic battle was truly epic. The problem was, I feel like every single character got away too easily. You know, there were no consequences whatsoever. I think there was only one character, which is Adolin, that suffered any type of consequence, which is sad. Yeah, like, let's make the person who doesn't have power suffer consequences, you know? But everyone else, especially Jasna, I remember her just being so OP. Like, she just had everything. She just knew how to get out of every single situation. She was so freaking powerful because of that soul cast. It's insane. Like, it's literally insane. And I just wanted a little bit more consequences, but other than that, it is such a solid book, because this book, in my opinion, has the best quotes from the entire trilogy. I am sorry, I absolutely loved Dalinar's past. I loved Dalinar's, you know, character growth and character arc. I love how he goes from someone being, in the beginning of the Stormlight Archive, we do see that he doesn't want to be the Black Thorn anymore. He doesn't really want to be that violent, but seeing how he was in the past, it really opened my eyes, because I thought like, oh wow, like he was actually very violent, and the things that he did in the past, unforgivable. You know, some things are unforgivable, but he's always willing to move forward. He's always willing to accept the mistakes that he has done and try to change. And I just absolutely love that character arc. I know a lot of people also enjoyed that one too. Of course, I did enjoy Shallan and Kaladin's adventures, but this book was Dalinar's book, and I absolutely loved it. I devoured every single second of it. And then we have The Final Empire. This was the first book that I read of Brandon Sanderson, and I was completely hooked, people. Okay, hooked. Because this magic system, I absolutely love it. I love the story, and just the writing, it felt very adult to me, you know? And I loved every single character in here, you know. Of course, I love Kelsier, Dawson, Ham, Clubs. We also have Breeze, Vin, Ellen, you know, just Says, the whole gang. Spook as well, okay? Spook as well. And I just really love the whole gang. And I also very much enjoyed the premise of this book, you know. Let's have a heist where we're literally going to steal the Empire from the Emperor, you know. To me, that was just something very fun, and seeing all of these characters just plan out and also execute the plan. And of course, not to perfection. We always have some obstacles that we have to go through. We always have some stuff that end up happening, but it was just amazing, you know. I absolutely love this book, and in this book we follow this big empire that is ruled by someone called the Lord Ruler, and this Lord Ruler has ruled for 800 years, and of course he is not a good person at all. He might have started as a good person, but it quickly became a dictatorship. And this society is a classic society where we have the nobility, and we also have the poor people who are called the Ska. And these people, when I say they are poor because not only do they not have any freedom whatsoever, they are slaves. They are literally working for the nobility. They have no rights absolutely whatsoever. And in this world, only the nobility have magical powers, and these abilities come from ingesting metal. So depending on the metal you ingest, for example, copper, you can hide whoever is using powers, or for example, if you use bronze, I think you can enhance those powers. You can find other people who are using powers. If you use, for example, I think it's zinc, you can alter people's emotions. If you use pewter, you can become faster, stronger. So you do have many metals who have different abilities, and usually one person only has one ability. But there are people who are known as Mistborn who can ingest any type of metal and have all of the powers. And usually Ska people, they don't usually have these powers because the nobility are forbidden to have relationships with the Ska. But of course, there are always a few that end up having powers, and these are mixed Ska. And of course, our main character, Vin, she is one of them. But she doesn't really understand her powers yet, and Kelsier actually ends up recruiting her, and she finds out that she is a Mistborn, which is something very rare. Kelsier is also a Mistborn, and thus ensues her being recruited to his band of thieves, and also ensues the mission to rob the Emperor of the Empire itself, because of course they want a better life for the Ska people. And it's just such a lovely adventure with all of these characters, and you really do grow to love them because they are truly complex, and you do see how complex they are in the next books. But every single person that reads Mistborn always ends up loving it, and I can understand why. It is so good. So if you have not read Mistborn, which is very strange, but if you have not read Mistborn, please read it. It is really, really good. And afterwards, I actually enjoyed the sequel, which is The Well of Ascension, a lot more. In case you haven't noticed, this is, I do have the Portuguese versions, but I actually enjoyed the second book a lot more than the first one. I know a lot of people don't really enjoy it because in the first one, and I don't think this is a spoiler, but, the heist, they do manage to defeat the Lord Ruler. And now, in this second book, you are left with this city, with this town, and it is the capital of the entire empire, Luthadel. So now they have to find a way to actually manage it. They have to find a way, how are we going to govern this? And in this book, that is exactly what happens. So this one is a lot more political than the first book, and that's why a lot of people didn't really enjoy it, because you don't have as much action as you do in the first one. Because, politics, it's not always made by fighting. You do have some fighting moments and some battles here, and you do have one interesting character, or at least, I find Zane pretty interesting. He is the Lulu. Let me tell you that, okay? He's cray-cray. But I do find him very interesting. I think he adds some oomph to the story, if you will. But I really enjoyed our characters in this book because Vin is also just going through a lot of, identity crisis. What is she? What is her point? What is her purpose in this book? And you also have other characters, for example, Elend. He's trying his very best to find a way to govern Luthadel without it turning into a dictatorship again, because everybody, of course, wants power. So this city is in constant danger, and that is what you're going to find in the second book. But I absolutely enjoyed this. I love it so much because I love political fantasy. It's one of my favorite genres, or subgenres, if you will, inside of the fantasy genre. And of course, I ate this one up. I do understand, you know, if you do love the action and the battles and the use of powers, that this one is not, you know, going to be your favorite and you're going to be bored, because it is a lot of politics. It is a lot of meetings. It is a lot of, you know, just, I don't want to say spying, but kind of like trying to find out what the other people know and trying to find a way to not being conquered. And it's just very strategic as well. So I do understand that you would be, you know, a little bit bored, but I absolutely loved this book. And then in the third place, you do have The Way of Kings. I love this book, okay? I absolutely love this book so much. And it's such a great book. You know, it's such a great first book for a fantasy series. I absolutely love this. I ate it up. It was so freaking good. And of course, as you can tell, this is not my favorite from the Stormlight Archive, but it is really close to it. It was amazing, you know, just getting to know the world of Roshar, getting to know our characters. And, you know, I don't know, like, I really don't know how to explain it, but in this world, we follow three POVs, or three main POVs. We follow Dalinar, Shallan, and Kaladin. Kaladin, he doesn't have an easy life whatsoever, at least in the beginning of this book, because he is a slave. He is a part of the bridge crew. And in this world, you know, these people, the Alendi, I think this is how you pronounce them, the Alendi, they are fighting against the Parshendi, which are some sort of like alien race in this planet. And they are a constant war. You know, the war started 7 years ago when the Parshendi killed the Alendi king. So of course they've been at war for 7 years. And in this world, you do have some cliffs. It's not really cliffs. How do I say this? How do I explain this? Because, you know, English, not my first language, but it's kind of like chasms, you know. So imagine, you know, a big plot of land, and then everything's just like broken up, and you have like these floating rocks, if you know what I mean. And this is why you need the slaves, because they are the bridge crews. They are the ones that carry the bridges. The army can go from one chasm to the next chasm, and Kaladin is a part of these bridge crews. And it's not an easy life by any means, because not only are the bridges heavy, but of course, if the Parshendi people are seeing, you know, the bridge, you know, being brought, they are going to shoot at you. So they're constantly shooting arrows, and you have a lot of slaves dying because of this. And they just, you know, people just don't care here. They do not care, because just like in the Mistborn world, in this world, you do have a hierarchy, but in this case, it's with the eye color. So if you have a light eye color, you are above the people who have dark eyes. For example, Kaladin, he has dark eyes, so obviously he's going to be below. And he's just fighting for his life. You know, Kaladin, he's trying his very best to see positivity in everything, optimism in everything, because his life, you know, he was a soldier previously, so it also wasn't easy at all. And his past is very hard, but he's trying his very best to also motivate his team and just making sure that nobody else dies on his watch, you know, because it is something that deeply disturbs him. So on one hand, this is what you have Kaladin doing, and of course he is the one that's going to find the powers of old, which in this case is going to be Stormlight, you know. And then we have Shallan, and Shallan, she comes from the nobility. She comes from a very rich family. The problem is her father has passed away, and he had a lot of debts. And now, in order for her to stay afloat, her and her older brothers, you know, in order for their family to stay afloat and pay the people that they owe money to, she has to steal a soul cast, because a soul cast is some sort of device in this world where you can pick up any material whatsoever. For example, you can pick up straw and make food out of it, you know. It doesn't taste that well, but it's still something that is very useful. And she has to pick one up because her father's soul cast stopped working. That is why he actually made a fortune as well. So she enlists to become an apprentice of Jasna. She is the best scholiast in this world, not only to steal Jasna's soul cast, because of course Jasna has a soul cast, so not only to steal that, but she also enjoys being a scholar as well. And she is also deeply troubled because she is starting to see things and she doesn't really understand what she's seeing. Of course, we're going to understand more about that. And then in the third character, we have Dalinar. He is the Blackthorn, or, you know, he was a Blackthorn, a very famous general. He won immense wars, immense battles, and he is now, you know, detached from that life. He doesn't really want to be violent anymore, and his sole mission in this book is trying to reunite all of the princes of Alethi, because once the king passed away, which was his brother, you know, Dalinar's brother, once he passed away, every single prince that was united, they kind of distanced themselves. They also want power. They're all fighting with each other, which is not good, because they are at war with the Parshendi, and Dalinar is trying to unite them all because he is having visions, you know, having visions of the past, of what once happened, because there is a desolation that is coming soon, and it has not been the first desolation, and he's trying to prevent that. And in order to prevent that, he has to unite everybody. So this is, you know, the premise. It is a lot more than that, because these books are long. Let me tell you, okay, they are long, but they are so good, so freaking good. Like, if I could read The Way of Kings for the first time, I freaking would. And then in second place, we have The Hero of Ages, which is the last installment in the Mistborn Era 1. Love this. I absolutely love this. I cannot tell you much because, of course, spoilers, but I just loved the villain, you know, the antagonist in this book. I loved Ruin as an antagonist. I loved how he just knew everything. Everything just felt so desperate. Like, literally, everything was just so desperate, was so bleak, because he just truly could not understand how these characters were going to win against this, god, essentially, because he is a god. He's at least part of one, and it was just insane. Like, I loved every single plot twist of this. I remember just being so flabbergasted and perplexed at everything that was happening. I loved it, and the ending, although it is a very sad ending, I do think it was perfect. It was perfect for our characters. Just the entire story in general, I think everything was just perfect. I love what Brandon Sanderson did with these characters, their path, and just how he developed these characters, especially Sazed. Sazed in this book has a special place in my heart because he is a very religious man, and in this book, he really does stop believing, because something tragic happens to him in the second book, and he doesn't really understand why. He doesn't really understand why, what happens to people when they die. He just cannot find comfort in religion anymore, which was something that he absolutely loved. He knew so many religions, he loved studying them, and in this book, he just stops believing altogether. He stops just having faith, and of course, in the end, he is going to find his faith. He is going to start believing again, but just that path, it was done so beautifully. I absolutely love this, okay? It was such a perfect ending. And then lastly, my favorite book of the entirety of the Cosmere has to be Words of Radiance. I know this is not new. A lot of people love Words of Radiance, including me. I just absolutely loved, even though Shallan is not my favorite character, I did really enjoy her past and getting to know her a lot better. But I also enjoyed where all of the other characters went. Kaladin, Dalinar, even Adolin, I really started to like Adolin in this book. And it was just perfect, I don't want to talk too much about it, so I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't want to give spoilers, but oh my god, there are so many iconic quotes in this book as well. So I think all of the iconic quotes come from this book, actually, and it was just amazing. The story gets so much bigger, so much grander, everything just gets so epic, and I absolutely love that. I feel like the story really needed it. At least this epic fantasy really needed to become epic, and in the second book, you do start seeing that. You have so much more world building, so much more explanation of the magic system, how everything works. Stunning, 10 out of 10. And that is the ranking of all of the Cosmere books that I have read so far. I think I've read all of them. I think the only ones I have not read, I think it was the graphic novels of White Sand. I still have not read those, but for the most part, I think I am quite caught up with the Cosmere. And I did say that I wanted to talk about the future of the Cosmere for me at the end of this video. And honestly, I don't really know what's going to happen because, as you could tell, the most recent books have not made it to my top 5. And I don't really understand what is happening with Brandon Sanderson. I think a lot of people are having this conversation, and I don't want to come across as like, oh my god, you're hating Brandon Sanderson because it's popular. Like, no. I generally do enjoy his books, and I am still going to read his books. I think I've made that decision, but I am not going to deny and sit here and say that something has changed. Something has changed. I think his writing has changed. I don't think it is as adult as it used to be. It is so much more young adult, and I don't really understand why. I don't understand why it has become so much more young adult. Maybe he wants to reach younger audiences. Maybe he wants to reach a broader audience, because he does have a business to maintain, and he's a good businessman. He has an excellent marketing team, and maybe it is that. Maybe he still wants to remain successful and wants to make even more money so he can, just do bigger things, because of course, with him doing, I think it was the Cosmere Ball, that costs money, it costs money. So I do understand how maybe by reaching a lot more people, you are going to be able to make more money. But on the other hand, I do miss that. If you notice, my top 5 favorite books are Stormlight Archive or Mistborn, Era 1 specifically, because even Era 2, it did still have that writing, but Era 2 has a different problem, which I am going to get into, but the writing, the quality of the writing, in my opinion, has decreased, and I cannot hide that anymore, For example, even with the Stormlight Archive, Rhythm of War, it wasn't the writing that bothered me, it truly was, the plot point and what Sanderson decided to do with the plot, which it is what it is. I wasn't really into science. I didn't really enjoy the thorough explanation that he gave for the magic system. I do understand why it had to happen, but it just wasn't something that I enjoyed whatsoever. But when in truth, one of the things that also disappointed me about it was the writing. The writing felt very childish. I don't understand what happened. The Stormlight Archive Archive deals with heavy topics as mental health, depression, PTSD, anxiety, thoughts of removing ourselves from this world. You do have to have some care with those topics, and I think, in the first books, especially Way of Kings, Word of Radiance, Oathbringer, you just could truly tell how careful he was depicting those mental health struggles and how adult it felt, and I don't know, man, I don't know what is happening, and it's just a little bit sad because, I am excited, for example, for Fires of December, but I am questioning, am I going to enjoy this? Or is this going to be like some of the secret projects where I'm just like, okay, it's a 3-star or 3.5. Is that going to happen? I'm a little bit afraid. I don't want to say afraid, but like, I'm a little bit skeptical, thinking, am I going to have an experience like I had when I read Mistborn Era 1 or the Stormlight Archive? Like, am I really going to be wowed again by Brandon Sanderson? I don't know. It's a little bit sad to think about this and to say this out loud, but it is something that I am concerned about. And not only with that, but also the other problem that Mistborn Era 2 has for me, at least, which is the Cosmere connections. I enjoy the Easter eggs like any other person, but the thing is, I never read the Stormlight Archive for those Easter eggs. Never did, don't want to, those connections, they are fun to make and they are fun when I spot them, but I don't want to have to go and read everything before I start a new book. I don't want to have to go to the internet and scour it and find all of these theories and all of these Easter eggs that I forgot. I don't want to do that, that was never my intention. And with, for example, Mistborn Era 2 kind of having this crossover with the Ghost Bloods, being in the planet of Scadrial and then being also in Roshar, do I want that? Because it is starting to feel very much like, oh, I will have to read some of these books to understand what the heck is going to happen, especially with Isles of the Emberdark, which is the 5th secret project. That one, I was like, oh my god, like, people cannot read this book without reading everything else before, because you're just not going to understand half of the things that are happening in that book. And that is something that concerns me, because I never entered this universe expecting it to be the MCU. I knew there was going to be a little bit of crossovers, but I thought, okay, like, some characters are going to meet other characters, that's fine. For example, the connection that you have between the Stormlight Archive and Warbreaker, it's minimum. And some characters from Warbreaker actually end up in the Stormlight Archive, but again, it is minimum. It doesn't have this big weight to the story. And that's what I wanted, kind of like, okay, small crossovers, it is fun, it is cool, but even the characters that I absolutely love, for example, in Mistborn Era 1, they're not going to meet anyone from Roshar, they're not going to meet anyone from any other planet, because most of them, they're not here. So it's kind of like, okay, why do I care? Why do I care? And honestly, that is just something that I'm also not excited to, because if this is going to become the MCU, I don't know. I'm going to give it a chance. I am going to read the next books that Brandon Sanderson is going to put out. But if I do see that it's very much MCU and that I have to read everything and understand all of the connections that are being made, I think I'm going to let go of the Cosmere. And I know this is crazy because I am constantly recommending the Mistborn trilogy to a lot of people, and I still am going to, because it is amazing. It is amazing. I absolutely love the Mistborn trilogy. I love the Stormlight Archive. Not every single book, but the first 3 books, solid. I absolutely love them, and I still do think that it is worth it to read the Stormlight Archive in its whole. But honestly, if it becomes very, interconnected, and if it starts feeling like a chore and kind of like a list of things that I need to do before I get to this book, I think I might abandon it. I think I might actually abandon the Cosmere. I'm still going to recommend, all the other books, because my love for them is never going to die. But yeah, I am still going to give Brandon Sanderson a chance. But I don't know, it's just kind of sad, because when I was making this video and I was seeing my ranking that I have here, on this small piece of paper, it's just so sad, because the most recent books are the ones at the lowest tier, and it's just like, wow, like, there is a pattern here, there is a pattern, and I don't know if I like that pattern. It also comes with, if I don't like all of the books that are being put out by Brandon Sanderson anymore, do I want to stay in his image? Do I want to stay in the books that I love so much, like Mistborn or the Stormlight Archive? Because how is it possible that, Brandon Sanderson wrote Wind and Truth and then wrote The Way of Kings? Like, it feels two completely different people, and I don't know, it's just a ramble, it's just a rant. So to conclude, I am still going to read Brandon Sanderson's new releases, but that might change, if I feel like it's becoming too MCU or the writing is just not there anymore, because honestly, I do not want to stay in the books I absolutely love from him. And that is it for this video, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed this ranking of the Cosmere. I know this is a long video, but he has a lot of books, okay? He has a lot of books. I tried to talk about them as much as I could, but please let me know down in the comments below if you agree with my ranking or if you have a completely different ranking. You know, what is your opinion on his most recent releases? Do you also feel the way that I do, that maybe his books are not having the same quality as before? Maybe he's writing too much, maybe he has way too many projects. You know, just let me know all of that down below, because I really want to know your guys' opinions. And please do not forget to like and subscribe, because it does help my channel out a lot and it gives me a lot of motivation and validation to continue filming these videos for you guys. And I will see you on my next video. Bye!